Welcome back to Native Strength. I'm your host, Hyapatia. We're going to continue our journey around the Wheel of Bullies. The sly manipulating bullies sit in the Southwest. Instead of working for what they want or directly asking for things, they've learned to play a game to manipulate people into giving in to them. They sit in the Southwest because it's their interpretation of how life works that causes them to behave this way. It's our own interpretation of events that allows us to be conned. If we take them at their word, we'll be controlled by them. It's only when we fully understand their motives and methods that we can count coup on them or prevent them from using us. These people become cunning and devious because they've seen this behavior work for others. They believe that's the only way they can get their needs met. They're not comfortable receiving love, appreciation, and emotional rewards from others for one reason or another, and they've built up walls that prevent them from receiving the positive energy these types of interactions provide. Instead, they have to fill their emotional need for approval with money, physical items, attention, and power. It's become an addiction. These people often attempt to make it look like they're giving us many choices, but none of these options will have any points in our favor. These people want something for nothing. They want to benefit from every interaction without leaving anyone else anything of value. The Southwest bully is an expert at finding what we feel guilty about. They'll find a way to use our guilt to manipulate us. They're hoping we'll be so unaware of our guilt that we won't notice it's being used against us. This is just another example of why it's imperative to know ourselves. For example, there are many people who feel bad that others don't have enough to eat, particularly families with children. A common con played out in parking lots and gas stations across the United States involves pulling on these heartstrings. A man with a broken car engine belt approaches with a story of how he and his family are homeless and on their way to a promising job where they'll be able to start a new life. The kids are hungry, and all they need is a few dollars for a new belt and some money to feed the kids. It sounds good. Any decent human being would want to help, and that's what this person is counting on. Just as the bullies in the South can be placed on a wheel, so can the bullies of the Southwest. The con artist I just described sits in the south of this wheel of bullies on the Southwest, along with misdemeanor criminals. The child who steals from your wallet is a Southwest bully who sits in the south on this wheel because, when confronted, he'll try to use emotions to manipulate us into feeling sorry for him or guilty for accusing him. The minor crimes that the bullies in the south of the Southwest wheel of bullies commit are done because they can't control their emotions. These criminals in the Southwest act this way because they've decided that this is the best way to get their needs met. In the west of this small wheel of Southwest bullies are those in codependent relationships. Because they're physically dependent on another, they sit in the direction of the physical world. These people depend on their partner for their very health and well-being. Now, to be clear, these are not actual invalids, the disabled, or those who are in a physical state that would understandably dictate the need for the physical assistance of another. But rather, these are people who simply can't bear to be alone. Instead of coming out and saying they want the other person to spend time with them, they often use manipulation. They use their love to play on the other person's feelings of guilt to get what they want. For example, one person wants the other to go to the store for them. They don't come out and ask, but they hint around about how certain items are needed and how they just don't feel up to going out to get them. They may continue this line of dialogue until the other person offers to go to the store for them. At that point, they've gotten their way. In playing this game, instead of coming out and asking for what they want, they've chosen to manipulate. even though if they had thought about it, their partner probably would have been happy to go to the store if they'd just come out and asked in the first place. This is a learned behavior that can be changed through consciousness and awareness. Unfortunately, many people don't take the time to examine their own behavior. In the north, on this small wheel of Southwest bullies, sit our politicians and governmental officials. These people become sly, deviant bullies when they don't follow the will of their constituents, but instead make policies favoring special interest groups that contribute generously to their campaigns. They sit in the north because they use their intellect to control others. If they were honest about why they vote the way they do, they wouldn't get reelected, and so they play manipulative games with words to appease their donors and keep their voters in the dark. In the east of this small circle of bullies in the Southwest are those who use their sexual attraction and beauty to manipulate others into giving things to them. These people sit in the east because if their victims would simply use their enlightenment, they wouldn't be influenced by them. Women who live off of unwilling sugar daddies, and men who are supported by their girlfriends while they stay home playing video games sit here. Now, to be clear, this does not apply to those who truly love another who may just happen to have money or be significantly older, but only to those who are using such people purely for their own economic advancement. This also doesn't apply to those who are working in a job that is honest about the fact that one is paying for the attention of another, such as an erotic dancer or sex worker. These are professions, trades, where everyone involved knows what to expect in the transaction. People enter into these activities with full awareness. Bullies in the Southwest are sly and manipulative. They thrive on keeping you in the dark. Can you see how all of these Southwest bullies focus on things we really don't want to admit to ourselves? Because we're unwilling to face these things, we're vulnerable to their manipulation. In the first example I gave about the man wanting money to fix his car to get his family to a new life, I was unwilling to look at the possibility of manipulation because I felt guilty for having enough money to eat when others did not. It was my guilt that led me immediately to open my wallet to give him money rather than to question the validity of his well-thought-out story. I never saw a wife, kids, or even a car. But I was willing to believe because I know there are those out there who are suffering, and I wanted to help. These bullies know these facts, and they use them to their advantage. If we're not willing to look at our own desire to help as a possible weakness, we can be taken advantage of by such people. When we're involved in a fantasy or illusion about ourselves or our world, we're open to manipulation by these bullies. The voter who believes everything the politician says is honest and stems from a pure desire to do the right thing is fooling himself. So, the way to count coup on these Southwest bullies is first to open our eyes and mind. We have to know the facts and not be afraid to be honest with ourselves. If we don't know ourselves well, these bullies will continue to have power over us. One of their favorite ploys is to convince us that we don't know what we're talking about or that we don't understand the situation. It's our own insecurity that keeps us from counting coup on these bullies. When we encounter a bully in the Southwest, our subconscious has drawn this person to us so that we may be made aware of our own fears and insecurities. These bullies won't be able to manipulate us if we're aware of these issues. It wasn't until I faced the fact that I felt empathy for those less fortunate that I was able to see that some people might use this to their advantage. When I became aware of this need to ease the suffering of others and how it could be used against me, I started to become more discerning. The key to counting coup on the Southwest bully is to know our own weaknesses first and foremost. Secondly, we must know the truth about any given situation, and the best way to do that is through communication. Whether it's verbal or written, we've got to know the facts. Once the truth has been discovered, then we can decide if it's best to confront our bully or simply walk away. If they have control over our life, such as in the case of a politician, We've got to stand up for what is right and educate others about the facts. When most people think of bullies, they think of the ones that sit in the West. These are the physically brutal and violent bullies. Deep inside, they're very insecure, but they've long ago turned off their emotions and buried their true feelings. They're terrified of being put down, especially in front of others, and, oddly enough, they fear being physically beaten. These bullies themselves were often the childhood victims of other West bullies. Quite a number of them had overbearing fathers who used physical violence to enforce the tyrannical rule. These bullies learned by example. They've decided they'll get their way by any means necessary. They thrive on fear, and if they can make others afraid of them and what they might do, they've won. They really aren't looking for a fight. They're looking for someone to intimidate. People who have poor self-esteem are easily manipulated by these bullies. That's because they already feel like they've been given a raw deal in life and expect to be mistreated, so they're more likely to go along with this type of behavior. It's no surprise to them, and so they readily assume the victim role they're so familiar with. When dealing with this type of bully, it's very important to keep in mind that they have no limits or boundaries. They'll resort to any means necessary to impose their will on others. Those of us who abhor violence and will do anything to avoid it have a tendency to stay in denial about these types of bullies. For example, a woman who's been beaten by her husband and calls her best friend for help only to be told he probably didn't mean it and that she'll be all right in the morning, has sought help from such a person. They have never matured emotionally to the point where they're able to face reality. This is not only crippling to one's evolution, but is also very dangerous. People who stay in denial and make excuses for the behavior of a loved one end up murdered by them every day. This doesn't mean that one should embrace violence, but rather that one should be prepared to take any step necessary to protect themselves from such a predator. Love is blind and can cause us to ignore obvious signs in hopes that we really aren't seeing the abuse that our inner elders know we are. Many people cling to the false belief that they can change these people. No one can change another unless that person wants to change. Severing all ties and moving to another state may be necessary in order to save yourself from a bully who sits in the West. The bullies of the West can also be put on a wheel, and the sociopaths sit in the south of this West wheel of bullies. They make a habit of being cruel to those weaker than themselves, and they thrive when they are feared. Because they have no true self-esteem, they've confused the fear they cause others with true power. This makes them feel better about themselves. The problem is, this feeling never lasts long, and so they need to frequently feed off the fear of others to meet their self-esteem needs. Sociopaths sit in the south on the West wheel of bullies because they're ruled by their emotional immaturity. In the west of the West wheel of bullies are those who abuse children and their significant others. This also includes children who abuse their aging parents, other family members, or classmates. These people use the physical violence of the West on their own flesh and blood and peers. This can be seen as a symbolic attack on a physical representation of themselves, which is a result of the fact they actually fear themselves. They're afraid of what they may be capable of. Just as they fear such abuse by others, they wield it vicariously as a way of punishing themselves. Their actions have the effect of cutting themselves off from the very people who love them the most. In the north of the West wheel of bullies are felony criminals and particularly sex criminals. These people use the mind to stalk and manipulate their prey or plan their crimes. They often design elaborate plans. They can also be very patient, waiting for just the right time to strike. These bullies all use the powers of the West, their body and the environment, to physically attack. If they're successful, they'll impact your energy, strength, health, and sanity, and they may even take your life. These bullies are powered by fear. They fear losing, being beaten, or shamed. But their biggest fear is that they can't get their way unless others are afraid of them. They doubt that others love them enough to do for them simply because they want to see them happy. There are only two ways to count coup on this type of bully: fight or flight. Those who are trained may wish to fight back. Most people who physically stand up to such a tyrant find their oppressor running away, never to return. However, that's not always the case. Don't attempt to fight a bully unless fully prepared. A victim of repeated stalking may need to carry a gun for protection, not for confronting this predator on purpose. The safer choice may be to avoid this person, if it's at all possible. An abused spouse may need to involve the police or even flee the state. These are the most brutal and dangerous bullies of all, and the news is filled with horror stories about their actions. When we encounter one of these tormentors, the lesson we need to learn may be how to cut ties and start a new life. Many people tell themselves, "This can't be happening to me," so they deny reality. This bully will force us to break out of this pattern of behavior. We can't simply ignore this type of intimidation and hope it will go away. In the midst of a violent attack, the victim may be forced to reach for the gun and pull the trigger in order to save his or her own life or that of a loved one. Occasionally in life, complacency can only be broken with violence. If we're in a pattern of ignoring an uncomfortable situation, procrastinating on making important, painful decisions, or have grown too comfortable in our stagnation, we may be sent one of these bullies to force us to change our course. The sad, depressed, shaming bully sits in the Northwest. These people feel sorry for themselves. The way they see it, the world has done them a grave disservice. Perhaps it has, in the beginning. But the events they refer to were more often simply results of their actions and could have been anticipated and avoided. They share their heavy heart with us, but may fail to mention what led to their tragedy. They see the entire world as unfair. Their vision of events is as limited as the mouse that can't see beyond his own whiskers. Since they're so centered on their own world, they have a hard time expressing any emotion other than self-pity. This vision is so twisted that it's led them to adhere to rules and laws that are unique to them. What others may see as dishonest, they may decide is perfectly acceptable, as in their mind, others follow the same guidelines. Their view of reality is completely distorted. This bully is born out of extreme insecurity. Since they doubt they're loved or appreciated, they become focused on themselves. They've not matured to the point of being able to find their own self-worth. These people don't feel satisfied with a job well done unless others notice and praise them. Now, to be clear, we all have this basic need for recognition, but a mature individual will be able to internalize approval. When someone relies solely on others for their self-esteem, they tend to become a bully of the Northwest because they need the approval of others so desperately. Their self-doubt is almost never expressed. That would be too painful. Suppressing their insecurity compounds their behavior and creates more depression and stress. This becomes their default setting, so to speak. They forget how to maneuver through life in any other way, and their vision becomes even more narrowly focused. They have an overwhelming need to make us feel just as guilty and as unworthy as they do. To manipulate us, they try to make us feel like we're not giving them the love and attention that they deserve. Not giving in to their wishes reinforces this belief. At the root of this insecurity is an insatiable need for love. This behavior makes us actually question how we feel about them. If it's a spouse or family member, someone we feel as though we should love, this will make us feel guilty. Of course, this was the plan all along. If we feel guilty, we'll give in to the demands of the Northwest bully. Ironically, the more we feel manipulated by these people, the less respect and affection we'll feel for them. At some point, the plans of the Northwest bully will backfire. It's easy to feel as though we've not done enough to help others, especially when they're people we love, respect, and admire, as these bullies always are. If they're not, this type of bullying would not be successful. To win approval, respect, or to fulfill a perceived obligation, we succumb to the manipulations of these bullies. After all, we want to do the right thing. We want to feel loved and good about ourselves, too. And so the cycle continues. When we encounter a bully of the Northwest, we'll always lose energy. Obviously, we lose energy and focus if we give in to them, but it also takes energy to overcome the effects of these people. As long as they communicate that they question our love, we'll spend energy trying to reassure them. It's a bottomless pit, though, that can't be filled because it requires self-love that no one else can give them. For example, I love my son dearly, but he suffers from an affliction that makes it hard for him to accept that someone would love him unconditionally. The more I gave to him, the more he demanded. The only way to show him he was capable of taking care of himself and that I would no longer be his physical punching bag was to move out of the state. Since then, he's purchased land, built his own home, and is no longer on the streets. The only way I could show him he was lovable was to leave him so he could discover it for himself. This took tremendous energy, and it affected my personal self-esteem. All the insecurities my son projected onto me stuck for quite a while. It was very difficult to break free from the effect of his words, but the results were exponentially worth it, not only for me, but obviously for my son. As always, these bullies can be placed on the wheel of life. Our social and cultural image makers are in the south of the Northwest wheel of bullies because they use our emotions to make us feel like we need to conform to be accepted. These are our peers. When we don't make choices they agree with, we're met with guilt, blame, and shame. In the west of the Northwest wheel of bullies are our codependent significant others. They doubt our love for them and use their sadness and shaming to make us feel guilty for any steps towards independence. They interpret autonomous behavior as a direct threat to the relationship, and by proxy, as a personal assault. Because they're threatened by any signs of individuality, they actively try to limit our interactions with others and perhaps even our ability to move about freely. This makes it almost impossible to avoid a relationship triangle where there's a persecutor, a rescuer, and a victim. These roles change frequently. One person will be the persecutor, one the victim, and the relationship will take the role of the rescuer. The next day, the former victim may be the persecutor, the relationship may be the victim, and the persecutor from the day before may play the role of the rescuer. Triangles do not roll along down the path like wheels. They struggle to reach a pinnacle, and then they fall awkwardly down on one side. After much effort, they finally rise to a point again where they wobble precariously until they finally come crashing down again. In the north, on the Northwest wheel of bullies, are family relationships. The example I gave of my son sits in the north. It can be reversed, as parents can unwittingly try to manipulate their adult children when they're lonely in their elder years. Instead of asking our children to take us on errands, perhaps we could simply go to their house for the day for some companionship. Our religious image maker bullies sit in the east on the northwest wheel of bullies. These are not all religious and spiritual image makers, to be clear, just the ones that try to repress our true spirit. These bullies make us feel guilty for enjoying life to the fullest. They may not mean to, but they douse our children's fire, our burning desire to seek out experiences in life in order to learn and grow. This is the essence of our inner children personas. Forbidding dancing, card playing, women wearing shorts or the color red are all examples of Northwest bullies who sit in the East. These activities have nothing to do with enlightenment. Participating in them obviously doesn't interfere with our communication with the Great Spirit, but those with low self-esteem who no longer enjoy life may force them on us. The key to counting coup on the Northwest bully begins with realizing that we're only vulnerable to this bully when we're not in full communication with our inner personas. When we know our own emotions intimately and are comfortable with them, this bully can't affect us. If we hear ourselves asking, "What did I do wrong?" or feeling like we haven't done enough, this bully is succeeding. One of the best ways to count coup on this bully is to show them a mirror. In other words, we could say, "It sounds like you don't know how loved or appreciated you are." Using logic to show them how we have repeatedly shown them our love in the past will remind them of what they've forgotten. It's important to use humor with this bully, lighten the mood, and perhaps explain your own personal path towards enlightenment for this lifetime to show why you can't do what they want. We have to maintain a healthy sense of respect for our own self in order to set good boundaries. When we free ourselves from the Northwest bully, we'll find our entire demeanor lightens and we get a clearer view of our path. We often find our advancement is greatly accelerated once we're no longer affected by these bullies. I hope this helps you on your path. Until next time, wishing you lots of native strength. Ay, ay, ay,